Let's start with roll call, Joan.
Charles Long,
Here.
Chris Martinson, Michael Shaw, Priscilla Benali, Kevin Mitchell.
Here.
Thank you, Joan. We do have a quorum, so I'd like to call the meeting to order at this time. Start with Pledge of Allegiance. Kevin? Yeah.
Mr. President, I would like to request a moment of silence for Barbara Stanley, who served as a board member for a number of years.
Okay, moment of silence, everyone. Okay, let's continue with our meeting. Let's go down to item number 2, approval of the agenda. Board members?
Mr. President, I would like to make a motion to approval of agenda.
Okay, motion's been made by Michael Shaw to approve the agenda for today's meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Kevin Mitchell. Roll call, Joan?
Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Shaw,
Yes.
Mr. Long.
Yes. Thank you, board members. We have approved our agenda for today's meeting. Let's go down to 2A, recognition. Mike?
There. Great. I'd like to turn the time over to Mr. Long. We wanted to recognize, as part of the NMSBA Region 1 Scholarship, Mr. Marcos Resendez. Is that correct? Say that. Resendez? Would you mind coming up to the microphone? Board members, if you come down.
Okay, board members, let's go down to item 3 on our agenda, approval of the meeting minutes from our May 31, 2022 regular meeting. Board members,
Motion, oh,
Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Like a motion to approve the minutes from the May 31st, 2022 regular meeting.
Okay.
Second,
motion's been made by Kevin Mitchell and second by Michael Schaaf to approve the meeting minutes from our regular meeting of May 31, 2022. Roll call, Joan.
Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Shaw,
yes.
Mr. Law.
Yes. Thank you, board members. We have approved our meeting minutes. Let's go down to item number 4, approval of consent agenda items.
Motion to approve consent agenda items 4A, 4B, 4C, 4D, 4E, and 4F.
Okay, motion's been made by Michael Schaaf to approve the consent agenda items. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Kevin Mitchell. Roll call, Joan.
Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Shaw,
Yes.
Mr. Law.
Yes. Thank you, board members.
Who told you item G?
Just going back to consent agenda items. Under financial section 3 and 4, there was an adjustment made. There was a new figure, and that should be included in the meeting minutes, Joan. Okay. Let's go down to item number 5, study circle.
You,
Okay.
Mr. Law,
Okay.
you need item G, address that.
I thought he approved all the consent.
He didn't say G.
Okay, let's go back up. There's another, right after F on the consent agenda items. There is a consent agenda item G, board members.
Motion to add, to not add, but yes, to approve that there is G under 4 for consent items.
Okay, a motion's been made by Kevin Mitchell to approve consent agenda G. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Chris Mortensen. Motion by Kevin Mitchell, second by Chris Mortensen. Roll call, Joan.
Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Shaw,
No.
Mr. Martinson,
Yes.
Mr. Law.
Yes.
Yeah, because he didn't read. I circle it on my paper that way. I know which one is. 110.
Okay, let's go down to item number 5, study circle. Mike?
President Long, members of the board, we do not have any reports today. There's no public comment and no reports due to the size of the action item section of the agenda. So nothing for today.
Okay, and then board members on the notices and communication, you can ink those in your calendar. Let's go down to new business. New business A, approval of GO bond notice of sale. Board members?
President Long, members of the board, we have several items, and so I think most of them are Giovanna Hanks and Chris items, or Ms. Montano also. So they're going to be coming up for each one of these items, and we'll let them give a little overview before, and then you can ask questions. Ms. Hanks?
President Long, members of the board, I did bring Mr. Klein up with me. I'm going to make sure he's coming to more board meetings as well as we discuss financial things as he continues to take on more and more of the financial information. And so he's going to talk about the GO bond sale.
Thank you, Ms. Hanks. President Long, members of the board, thank you. So this first item, it's the notice of proposal to issue general obligation bonds. We do have several projects going around at our schools, including remodeling, making additions to and furnishing school buildings, purchasing, improving school grounds, purchasing computer software, hardware for students. And this sale of the GO bonds is going to assist with that. We do have on the line, we have Regina Gesina from RBC Capital Markets. She's our financial advisor here as well, if you all have any specific questions related to this, but this is just the notice to issue those general bonds out.
Mr. President, I have a quick
Chris.
question. I assume this just runs us up to our limit again? Great.
Yes, it does, but we come August, we are going to be making a principal payment, so that way we can free up some of that bonding capacity. And I think after that, Regina may be able to give us the specific amount, but I think we're going to be right around $7 million after we make our principal payment in August.
Great. Okay.
Any other questions, board members?
Mr. President, motion to approve item 6A.
Second?
That's a wrong microphone. Motion's been made by Chris Mortensen, second by Michael Schaaf to approve new business. A, approval of GO bond, notice of sale. Roll call, Joan.
Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Shaw,
Yes.
Mr. Mortensen,
Yes.
Mr. Long.
Yes. Thank you, board members. Let's go down to new business. B, approval of IDEA application.
President Long, members of the board, we'll have Ms. Hanks back up.
President Long, members of the board, this is an application we complete each year. There has been extensive consultation with both the private schools that are impacted as well as the determining the special education needs of the district. As was discussed earlier this year, we are making some changes to the administrative side of special education services, and so those changes are reflected in this application.
Board members. I think this is the reason why we need to get our packets when they're available.
It's all
Members of the board, is
The
there a
la-
specific section? Are you
Is
looking
that
for this
a l-
specific section?
The last pages, the last few pages.
Yeah. Okay.
Mr. President, this
Chris.
is, I mean, to me it looks like it's just a reoccurring grant that we apply for,
Mhm.
correct?
Yes.
I don't have any specific questions. I mean, I would, move that we approve item 6B.
Second?
Okay, motion's been made by Chris Mortensen, second by Michael Shaw to approve new business. B, approval of IDEA application. Roll call, Joan.
Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Shaw,
Yes.
Mr. Mortensen.
Yes.
Mr. Long.
Yes. Okay, let's go down to new business C, approval of the 2022-2023 calendar memorandum of understanding between GMCS and Metfuse. Board members?
President Long, members of the board, as you know, we tried to open up negotiations last winter, February, and have tried to, as fast as possible, to negotiate with McFuse, and we are now in June, and we finally, although we don't have anything ratified by the union, because it went into June, the union said that they would not be able to ratify anything until August when teachers returned. I'm not quite certain why that is. Maybe online meetings aren't possible the way that they operate, but they are going to wait until August to bring this to the membership. In the meantime, you see two memorandums of understanding between GMCS and McFuse, and that's what's on the action item agenda today. And so we will talk about each of those. We did propose the calendar fairly early on, the one that you have in your packet. At some point, the calendar is something that you want out as early as possible, and that's why we proposed it very early, so that staff and parents and students can plan for the summer and plan for next year as families are busy and schools are busy. Every year, it seems that this is an item that the union wants to save until last, and they did the same this year. And so the agenda the calendar that we originally proposed was the one that was eventually accepted by MOU and is on the agenda today. The only thing that's slightly different on that calendar is that we did not yet designate parent-teacher conference dates. And so we will notify everybody of those dates as soon as possible. But everything else is on the calendar. We also tentatively released that because it was taking so long for the union to agree or not agree to that calendar. Some of you may have noticed on Facebook we did put that out for families as a tentative. That way at least they could start planning in hopes that the union accepted that version. And it appears that they did. So we are just here to, on our end, approve that MOU. Giovanna, do you have anything to add on that item?
Mr. Long, members of the board, Mr. Hyatt, we did ask about going into extended school year, as that is still a program that is often pushed by the state for the districts. And we did propose that from the very beginning of negotiations, but the union has let us know that there's no amount of money that we could offer that they would work the additional 6 days.
If I could put that in perspective, 6 days for, I don't know, is it close, probably an average of $3,000 or so onto somebody's salary as a teacher, and others. It's not just them, it's another increase of at least a 3% more increase to the rest of the staff that are in the school sites. We're talking 6 more days of working and educating our students for approximately $3,000 or more. If you break that down, it's like almost at least about $500 or more a day for those extra 6 days. But this is something that we feel that our students need, a little bit more time in the classroom and instruction. The union again says that there's no amount of money would bring them to do that for our students and for their own pocketbooks.
Mr. President, I have a quick question just on that point. Just and I'm not asking you to speculate, but Was this, that action and that attitude towards extended learning, is that something that was like put to a vote with you know, a general population of teachers and union members, or how do they make those types of decisions for their membership?
President Long, Mr. Mortensen, I am not exactly certain. From what I understand, and Ms. Hanks may have a little bit more information, I believe it's only the dues-paying members that vote. I'm not sure that outside of that, teachers get a vote, but I could be wrong on that.
Mr. Long, members of the board, Mr. Hyatt, so the union president speaks on behalf of the entire bargaining unit. Now, their bylaws, which we don't have any access to, I'm not sure who they allow to actually vote or give input on various things. We just don't know.
Is that, Ms. Hanks, is that something that they have any, you know, public record or transparency about who voted? Like, if it is something just like within their, you know, the leadership team or something like that, like who voted? I mean, people need to know who's responsible for, you know, for representing their best interests.
Mr. Long, Mr. Mortensen, you know, every member that's covered by the agreement has the ability to go speak with their representation. And that's what I would advocate for them to do. The district really does not have any, our span of control, of course, we are two separate entities and they are not a public entity. So they don't have the same Open Meetings Act requirement as we do as a governmental entity.
That's unfortunate. I think people probably would like to know who's responsible for financially jamming them up.
Well, and I highly encourage any member that's represented by the union to speak with their leadership, because it is their leadership as a covered member of that union.
I would invite them to come here to our board meetings and, you know, talk about that kind of thing. I don't know how exactly logistically that would work, but I mean, man, I think that our teachers and staff have a right to know, like, who's making the decisions, these types of decisions that can, you know, financially impact them. That's all, Mr. President.
And I just want to add that we have to be very careful as management in doing any type of survey. We can't have any dealings with the staff in a way that would potentially be contrary with respect to negotiations what the other side is presenting to us. And so we represent the district. On our end, we represent everybody. We represent the staff, the students, and the whole entire entity. On their end, they're only representing certain staff members that are covered under the collective bargaining.
Okay. Questions? Other questions? Board members?
Motion to approve of the 2022-2023 calendar memorandum of understanding between Gallup McKinley County Schools and McHughes.
Okay, motion's been made by Michael Schaaf to approve new business C. Is there a second?
I'll second it. I mean, we need to move forward with this thing, but it just is.
Okay, second by Chris Mortensen. Roll call, John?
Mr. Mitchell?
No.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
Mr. Mortensen?
Yes.
Mr. Long?
Yes. Thank you, board members. We'll approve that. And let's go down to new business D. Approval of 2022-2023 salaries memorandum of understanding between GMCS and McHughes.
President Long, members of the board, I just passed out to you a document that should have been in your packet. We did not, for some reason, not get it in, but this is the second MOU that was agreed upon that the union will look to ratify in the fall or late summer. This has to do with salaries, and so we spent a lot of time going back and forth on salaries to come down to a final number for everybody and what that schedule looks like. And this is the specific document that we are looking to bring to you to approve. I'll let Ms. Hanks, she was the lead negotiator. Mr. Bell and Ms. Montagna were also on the negotiating team on our side, and I popped in once in a while when I could. But I'm going to have Ms. Hanks give you a little bit more detail about that process and kind of what the conclusion came to be as far as salaries, maybe a little information how that compares with others in the state. And so I'll turn the time over to her.
Mr. Long, members of the board, as we approach this, the legislative session did two things. It did a 3% increase to the current year, which we paid out as a one-time addenda, which was through an agreed-upon process with the union. So that automatically raised salaries by that 3%. Now, the next piece of legislation said, on average, a 4% increase. And if that doesn't get you to a new minimum, the new minimums. And the new minimums were the 50, 60, 70 for teachers. And it was also the $15 an hour for classified staff. So the district went in with a couple of things. So counselors are no longer included as part of the training and experience index. The legislature actually took them out of that formula several years ago. And so while that no longer applies, that tiered licensure no longer applies to our counselors, we feel that they're a very strong and important part of our district and are of great benefit to our students. And so they will also remain for us on the 1, 2, and 3. And this is part of the compaction that you're hearing now statewide, is that essentially districts, through their various calculations and their priorities, you know, they've had to make some of these decisions about who will and will not remain on these tiered salaries. The other individuals for our district who are no longer part of that, we don't get any additional funding for them, is our ancillary staff. And that's another area that the district feels very strongly. Those students need those specialized services, and so they will remain on the tiered licensure as well for our district. Also, we all looked at the minimums at the $15 an hour, and we looked at competitive salaries because we want to be sure that we remain competitive so that we keep ourselves as fully staffed as possible. So the amounts that you're seeing on the MOA that are in front of you are actually not just the $15 an hour minimums. They are actually looking at what is the competition in our area and what are our employees already making. Again, we're trying to stay away from compaction as much as we can. There was a little bit of that, but we tried, especially for our most modestly paid employees, to stay away from that. And so, you know, we had kind of really put forward the 5% and not doing it as an on average, doing it as a minimum for everyone. And then if they didn't get to a minimum, jumping into a minimum. I'm actually gonna ask you to open up your packet that I had given you, the bound packet. And if you look at the very front page of your bound packet, you'll actually see the percentages by category for increases. And so you're gonna notice on there some pretty substantial changes to our salaries. And that comes in part with legislation, but also as far as the district attempting to stay competitive and staying away from. We probably would have been, I know that I don't really want to get back into this topic, but we would have been able to offer a little bit more had we had some more flexibility with funding with extended learning, because there was an opportunity there to maximize some funding. But we were able to do the best we could with the funding we did receive. And so you'll notice on there that many of those percentages are significant. Now, because there is a statutory rule under NMSA 222010A that basically states high school principals, middle school principals, and elementary school principals have to get a certain factor of what a level 3 teacher makes. And so much of our administrative change in percentages was due to that change. Ultimately, we found a fair compromise, and we're hoping that this does receive approval.
Mr. President?
Kevin?
So what is the increase as far as comparing to last year's, our budget last year, our percentage going towards employment pay, and then also what is the percentage that GMCS will be paying to fulfill these, percentages that were, brought to us by the state?
Mr. Long, Mr. Mitchell, I believe you're asking how much of these raises is essentially unfunded. Yeah, so it's very hard for me to say. I've attempted to get better calculations from the state, and so far have been pretty unsuccessful. But essentially, the state asked us for 4% on average. So really, I could have applied the minimums and given nobody else a raise, not a single other person, and met the statutory requirement. And so by doing it across the board, we are largely unfunded for the amount that we are giving. We still are within the average range for using our state equalization guarantee. The majority of our budget, about 86%, will be salaries and benefits.
What was that again? 80%?
86%.
And I would add that's still within the range of what a typical district has for salaries, about 86% on average for the state. But I'd say that there's a lot of districts, for varying reasons and varying conditions that they're in, are really struggling to meet any of the required raises for staff. And I would also add that all the superintendents I've talked to, I think most of the state, were definitely offering more, agreed to more for staff than most of the state of New Mexico.
And one final thing, this will be the first year since I've been here that transportation is not going to have enough money to support its program to stand alone. They did not give us enough funding through the transportation funding formula, so that will need to be paid by operational. We're going to pick up about $250,000 of cost from transportation and operational.
And I just wanted to add that when I talk about more, it means more this year compared to last year as far as the increase for salaries. And then piggybacking off what Ms. Hanks about transportation funding, most districts have been underfunded for transportation. Part of the Yazzie Martinez lawsuit, that was a part of our lawsuit that we won. Now we're actually in the same boat as everybody else, where we are being now underfunded for transportation. And so instead of the Yazzie Martinez lawsuit actually helping, it's actually gotten worse from the state end as far as meeting that ruling, which is unfortunate, and it's definitely something I'm sure that will be talked about during the next session.
Mr. President, I'd like to
Chris.
make a motion to approve item 6D, please.
Okay. Motion's been made by Chris Mortensen and second by Michael Schaaf to approve new business D. Roll call, Joan.
Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Shaw,
Yes.
Mr. Mortensen,
Yes.
Mr. Long.
Yes. Thank you, board members. Let's go down to new business E, approval of basic life insurance.
President Long, members of the board, also have Ms. Hanks up here to talk a little bit more in depth. But one of the things that we have the opportunity to do is to increase benefits when we feel that we are able to do so. This does not take union negotiation. Benefits are not a part of addenda, or benefits are not a part of that process. And so Javon will explain why this is on the agenda now, but we wanted to add further benefits for our current staff and also for the recruitment of staff by increasing life insurance benefits, I guess you could say. So, Ms. Hanks.
Mr. Long, members of the board, as Mr. Hyatt was saying, he tasked his executive leadership team with looking statewide and seeing what benefits were out there that we had not looked at or that we did not feel that we were competitive with. And this is definitely one that we were not competitive with. So looking at the statewide enrollment in the New Mexico Public Schools Insurance Authority, we were one of the few districts that were still in the $25,000 category. And so this is one of our recommended items to continue to make us a competitive district.
Ms. Hanks, can you say what the difference is from what to what as far as payout for death benefit?
Sure. So for our employees, this will go from a $25,000 payout to a $50,000 payout should they have any unforeseen incident that actually they end up becoming deceased. And that's a benefit that we pay for them so that their families have that security.
Questions, board members?
The cost, Giovanna, can you share really quick what they're thinking about that? The cost is pretty negligible.
Yes, Mr. Long, Mr. Hyatt is correct. We were paying per check $2.32 per employee, and that will essentially go up to about $4.64. So pretty negligible change, but a good benefit for our employees.
Motion to approve a basic life insurance resolution.
Okay, motion's been made by Michael Shaw to approve new business E. Your second?
Second.
Second by Chris Mortensen. Roll call, John.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
Mr. Mortensen?
Yes.
Mr. Long?
Yes. Thank you, board members. Let's go down to new business F. Approval of the fiscal year 2022-2023 Gallup McKinley County Schools budget. Mike?
Yes, President Long, members of the board, annually, obviously, as you know, we have to get a budget approved and also take that budget to the State of New Mexico Public Education Department for approval also, and it's that time of year. And so Ms. Hanks, district has provided you a binder that kind of goes over the presentation. Ms. Hanks will be going over the items, and as you need more information, you just need to let us know and we'll answer the questions. Mr. Klein is here also, who can also help, and Kate On and Mr. Bell.
Mr. Long, members of the board, I'd really like to express my sincere appreciation. I always say this, while I tend to be the person up here letting you know the changes that have been made, I am by no means the sole person that makes this happen. Mr. Klein and his team have been invaluable over the last year in really making a difference to how effective and efficient that we're able to be in the business office. The support of Kate On and her staff in making sure that we have correct personnel information and know the initiatives that are coming, as well as Mr. Bell, in making sure that we know the educational initiatives that the school district is going to be looking at. Their teams have been nothing short of fantastic, and so I'm very appreciative to all of their assistance. I was actually talking to Mr. Hyatt about, you know, how many years that I've kind of presented this, and for especially Mr. Mitchell, he's going to know the most. It used to be kind of a struggle because the district and the board were not always on the same page. And really in making a strategic plan, in making sure that we're communicating often, sharing information, communicating with our families, our communities, our students, it's really made a huge difference in how preparing these documents go. And so it's been an interesting transition for me, and a very good transition for me as we've done this. And so I'm happy to bring with you a very comprehensive budget. Again, the salary increases were the 3% FY22, 5% for FY23. But as you can see below, many of those will be much higher, and that is due to the minimums. You know, teachers, counselors, nurses, ancillary, who are all kind of on those tiered schedules, will see on average a 13% increase. Secretaries, a 17% increase. Custodial maintenance and warehouse, a 23% increase. And those numbers are on average. So while each individual member may see a different percentage, those are substantial in the history of Gallup McKinley County Schools and in the state of New Mexico. Our educational contribution will increase from 15.15 to 17.15. So that means the district contributes to the retirement account on our employees 17.15% of their allowable income. That's substantial. For anyone who has ever worked in a private sector job or is currently working in a private sector job, a 17% contribution by your employer to your retirement account is unheard of, and it is a substantial piece of our budget. So new supports, as we have discussed, Elevate 2025 will be coming out in the new year, and we will be looking at a continuity of services initiative. And what does that mean? It means that every school that you go to, you should have a similar feel and a similar experience. And so we're looking at the customer service, we're looking at the offerings, we're looking at, you know, how we're making sure to connect with our community and parents at every one of our school sites. Deans is a new administrative structure. As you may have been aware, we had two previous administrative positions. One was our school leader interns, and the other was our instructional coaches. And what we found is those programs were not effective. And so we've come back as an administration, redesigned them. And so we really feel that the school leader interns, the dean position revised, reimagining that, instructional coaches are just going away. Lesson plan banks as teacher supports, these will provide.
One thing, I just
Yes.
wanted to make one comment on that. Actually, we reduced administrative costs
Yes.
with the deans. So if you took all the employees that were there before, we have less employees in administration now. So.
Yeah, so the school leader interns reimagined into deans, instructional coaches are just no longer a position. Lesson plan banks as teacher supports. These are just supports for our teachers. We know that we get many different types of teachers that come to us. Some of them that are very experienced, some of this may be their first teaching job. And so we want to be sure that we're offering them as much support as we possibly can. Pathway supports, really reinvigorating that program, making sure that every school has the equipment, supplies, staff, training, internship, all of those experiences that they need to make them successful. We will be building a framework for assessments in heritage language. The district will be issuing out a graduate profile. And what we mean by this is that our students are not just earning a diploma or an associate's degree or a certificate of some type. They are really becoming global citizens. That's what we want each of our students to do. We want them to walk away with a good set of skills and to become a global citizen. Special education administrative changes, as we had discussed in approving the IDEA, and upgraded security district-wide. So there will be improvements to our physical infrastructure as well as some new security protocol that will be implemented for next school year, and those will be all going out through the school safety teams.
And a part of that, board members, is camera upgrades. There's a significant amount of dollars being spent to improve our systems, make them even more helpful to our administration and others to make sure that our students and staff are safe. So, including vape detectors, which is another thing you didn't know about 10 years ago, but we're going to do some other things as far as safety with respect to health, and so it's not just physical safety.
As Mr. Hyatt was indicating, we will be leveraging different types of technology to be sure that we are moving as efficiently and effectively as we possibly can, because safety is always one of our main priorities for both our staff and our students. Ongoing supports, really focusing on what's working, making sure we're doing programmatic analysis on where we're seeing benefits, where students are really seeing benefits, and if a program is not working, really finding out why it's not working and how we can modify it in order to help our students. That's an ongoing process. That will always be a task of the district, making sure that we're using our money as effectively and efficiently as we can. Summer school, after school credit recovery, those are all things that we will continue to prioritize in this budget. 90-day planning and curriculum planning, making sure that our schools, again, with that continuity of services, we have a lot of mobility in our district, and so students move from school to school, and we want them to be able to receive the same type of services regardless of which school they're at. So if they go from one middle school to another, that curriculum is aligned, and so they're getting that same service and experience. Pathway initiatives, the initiatives that we had, again, are staying and will become more robust. Student-led parent-teacher conferences. Parents are the first teachers, as I hear time and time again. And when you look at the amount of time that students spend in school and the amount of time that students spend at home, they don't spend the majority of their time in school. They spend a small percentage of their time, and we try to use that time as wisely as we can. And so we hope to connect more with our parents and making sure that they have good information and good support so that they can support their students. Multi-layered system of support, so that means special education, English language learners, heritage language, credit recovery. When our students need additional supports, we want to be sure that we have the materials and the ability to differentiate that support so that they can be successful through their needs. Multicultural festivals, which I have significantly missed since we were all not allowed to move about. Our district has a very rich multicultural heritage, and I'm so proud to live in such a diverse community, and so I cannot wait to get out and get back to those multicultural festivals. Opportunities for college, career, and civic field trips and partnerships. We want our kids out there knowing what's available. From elementary, middle to high school, those kids have to start exploring so that they know when they leave our doors where they're going to go. Expansion of teacher housing. Thank you to the board again for allowing us to issue more revenue bonds so that we can continue our expansion of teacher housing. That is an invaluable initiative for the district to help secure trained educational staff. Surveys and needs assessments. Parents, community members, and staff members have been brutally honest over the past year, and I hope they continue to do so. They have laid praise for programs that are working well, and they've given us good operational criticism for things that we can change. Their voices are always important, and yes, we definitely read every survey that people return. Disaggregation of data and monitoring success, really understanding what is the data telling us, what is actually happening, what do we feel is happening and what is actually happening, and how are we helping each one of those unique student groups to progress and make sure that they're making gains. Policy updates, and then updates to maintenance and custodial and construction services. Those are all the ongoing supports that will continue with this budget.
Ms. Hanks,
Yes.
we just want to touch on technology and hotspots. I think we missed that one, but the board had asked us to make sure that we continue with one-to-one devices for students and also providing internet access. We also had a ruling in the Ozzie Martinez lawsuit with respect to the state funding that. The legislature and other state have yet funded technology to the capacity that needs to be done. Especially with respect to that ruling, nothing significant has been done whatsoever. But we are still making sure within our budget that we are planning for and supporting our students and staff with appropriate technology so that they don't get left behind. We want them to be on the forefront as far as understanding and learning technology, because that's a part of the career pathway work that we do. It actually starts in the elementary school grade level, where they are learning how to use technology, and that helps them build the skills they need for their future careers. And it continues on through middle school and high school.
Thank you, Mr. Hyatt. And it's funny, as I reflected back, I didn't even think that, 2 years ago when I was standing in front of you, maybe 20 students in our district had one-to-one devices on a regular basis. And now it's almost every student. It's an amazing difference that has happened, but it's something that long-term is going to cost us a significant amount of money to maintain. And then as far as concerns and updates, unfortunately, the public education department still is experiencing significant operational issues, and so award letters and requests for reimbursements are still significantly delayed. Award letters a year to a year and a half out, unfortunately. I'm looking at Mr. Klein. So about a year to a year and a half out, and I believe our last temporary cash transfers were in the $11 million range because we had not received reimbursement on funds that we had expended. There was a statewide analysis done of that, and unfortunately the problem is statewide, that they are just not turning around those reimbursement of funds to districts timely. So the district again will continue to have to carry those and maintain funds to carry them until such time as those operational issues are fixed.
And I'd add, just please pay attention, as you always have, but continue to do so with the legislature. Some of them get in their minds that this cash carryover and us having to carry and float these funds is some sort of extra cash in our bank account, and it is not. Those are dollars that we have to have in place to cover our liabilities. And then legislators all of a sudden think, oh, you have $11 million. Well, why aren't you spending it? Well, you don't need it. Well, that's absolutely not true. We're actually covering for the state of New Mexico for not operating properly and treating our students the way they should be as far as distributing cash. And so please understand that. Cash balances are not a problem in New Mexico. It's actually the people that are taking care of the funds and in a timely manner for our students.
And Mr. Hyatt is absolutely correct. We have seen nothing but over the past several years that grow. When this first started, it was a very big struggle. Now it's kind of almost that I know that I have to figure out a way to make that work within the budget. It is just a baseline. And then lastly, there were some changes, and this is kind of an odd technicality. So the state has decided to create new funds for funds that already exist. So the district has carried teacherage debt and teacherage general obligation bonds for years, but the state never recognized those. And so the district always had to create our own internal sub-fund and then just report them underneath the main fund. Well, the state's finally actually recognizing those this year, and so they've created several new fund numbers. Two of them, the 15100 and 151-200, those are related to HB6, and the district actually heavily advocated those so that we could be sure that the state would not look at our overall operational fund, because we know that those funds are set aside as the credits have been taken away to be sure that we're able to take care of the needs of our students. And then 31-120 and 41-200, those are both related to teacherage revenue bonds. So the three funds, I'm going to ask for a permanent cash transfer, but I'm not going to be able to specify the amount until the very end of the year, until that has actually transacted, and then I'm going to be able to put that amount and put it into a new fund. On the teacherage revenue bonds, we know what the principal and interest payments will be next year, so we do have an amount on that permanent cash transfer for you today. So those are kind of a unique change this year. The next page, I do have some graphs, and this just tells you where our revenue sources come from. And you're going to notice a significant change in impact aid. This is related to the creation of those HB6 funds. The state actually, so how the credits used to work is they would calculate our program guarantee and then say less the 75% that we're taking credit for. And so we never wrote them a check for impact aid or sent them a wire transfer. They just didn't give us state money. And so that amount that they are no longer taking credit for is what those two new funds are, but they won't let us label them as state equalization guarantee. They want them labeled as impact aid or forest reserve, or the accounting does not follow the actual statutory language. And I've tried to get that some sort of understanding, but as usual, the state does not understand. So it does look a little strange, and that is why. But the funds are definitely still there. They're just in the new fund, the 15100. And then as far as projected expense, and I am sorry, I did want to mention that you will notice our emergency reserve is now listed at $8 million. As we all know, our account in the SEG has gone up pretty dramatically. Our previous emergency reserve was at $5 million. We have now set aside $8 million, and that is what will carry the district statutorily should something negative happen at the state, so that we don't have to make hopefully any drastic cuts mid-year or do a reduction in force. This is kind of stemming from legislation that's been on the books for a while, but many districts paid a lot more attention to it after fiscal year 16, when the state actually ran the entire state budget into the negative. So this is just our security for our employees that we can continue to make payments and honor the contracts that we've issued. And then you'll notice the temporary cash transfers of $12 million. That's what I estimate the district will have by the end of the year that we will be carrying on behalf of the state. And then our actual cash carryover will be around $7 million. And that will actually take care of any carryover purchase orders, our liability property payment at the beginning of the year, which is $3.5 million. And it will also pay out any cash liabilities for benefits. And then the projected expenditures by type, by far the greatest amount of our expenditure is within direct instruction. And then support services for students, so this is nursing, ancillary staff, those types. And then our support staff, which is our discovery centers, our liaisons, those type. the board, which has a very small budget, the superintendent and the board, school sites, so this is directly at the school site administratively, central services, and then maintenance and operation of plant. That 35 million where that is, that's actually where the $8 million emergency reserve is embedded. Student transportation, as I mentioned before, I believe that we're going to end up having to modify that given our current budget concerns. Other support services, food services, community services, which is our JPA with the swimming pool, and the capital outlay. And capital outlay is significantly smaller this year because that's been broken out into those new HB6 funds. There is an organizational chart after the pie charts. And so any of the administrative changes that have been discussed are now represented on the organizational chart. I have put in a draft of all of the salary schedules. And so if you would like to look through these do honor what was discussed for both the CBA and non-CBA staff changes. And
It's the purple page, isn't it? The
yes,
next section.
there's a purple page. And then, and this does cover all staff of the school district. And then also included is our outstanding debt as of June 30th. That is the next section. There are all of the various tables related to principal and interest payments. And I did want to highlight what Mr. Mortensen said is essentially, yes, we do pay a principal payment to pay down some of our debt, and then we turn around and borrow more. And it's been that way for decades because we have been maxed out on bonding capacity for decades. And the last section is actually the technical documents that Mr. Klein and his team have done an amazing job in making sure that we enter into the state system. But what I did was list all of the funds that we have and the amounts of those funds that we're putting forward for next year. The items in green are those where we're creating new funds. We're just moving from one fund number to the next. No funds will move out of the district. The district will not be negatively impacted in any way. They will just have new fund numbers, new fund names. And that is the district budget. I am open to any questions, concerns.
Questions, board members?
Just a comment, you do a fantastic job.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. I
Your
don't do it alone, please.
No.
team is crushing it. Looks like same fun with a different name, different number. Mr. President, I'd like to move that we approve this budget. This is item 6F.
Okay. Motion's been made by Chris Mortensen to approve 6 item F.
Second.
Second by Michael Shaw. Roll call, Joan.
Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Shaw,
Yes.
Mr. Mortensen,
Yes.
Mr. Long.
Yes. Thank you, board members. This time I'd like to entertain a motion for us to go into executive session.
So motion.
The motion's
Second.
been made by Chris Mortensen and second by Michael Shaw to go into executive session to discuss several items. Roll call.
Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Shaw,
Yes.
Mr. Mortensen,
Yes.
Mr. Long.
Yes.
2 o'clock.
Okay. Let's go into executive session. This is it. Now, what was this to say? Tachetija. Hey, Andy. Good to see you, sir.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that we return to regular session from executive session, or however you want to word that. Exit executive session and return to regular session. Please.
Thank you, board members. Chris Mortensen made a motion to come out of executive session. Second, is there a second? Second by Kevin Mitchell. Roll call, Joe.
Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Shaw,
Yes.
Mr. Mortensen,
Yes.
Mr. Long.
Yes.
3:13.
We're out of executive session. And let's go down to new business G. And we discussed 6 items in our executive session, and we gave instructions to our attorney on these issues. That's the
Items listed on the agenda.
yeah, the items listed on the agenda. That's the report, so what's the pleasure of the
Mr.
board?
President, I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn for the day, please.
No, we have to vote.
Oh, do we have to vote first on an item?
You don't have to, this is,
There's nothing to vote on the discussion.
okay.
If there's none.
Okay, well, that's
Okay.
my report on the executive session then.
My motion stands, please.
Okay,
Second.
motion by Chris Mortensen and second by Michael Schaaf to adjourn. Roll call, Joan?
Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Shaw,
Yes.
Mr. Mortensen,
Yes.
Mr. Long.
Yes.
3:15.
3:15, we're adjourned.
I need signatures